Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell disappeared on October 15, 1983, while conducting research at St. Mary's Mission Church in Wickenburg, Arizona. The 32-year-old librarian had told her sister she planned to spend the afternoon photographing historical documents and interviewing local residents about the church's founding. According to police reports, Mitchell was last seen alive at approximately 2:15 p.m. by gas station attendant Robert Hayes, who sold her a Coca-Cola and gave her directions to the old mission site. Mitchell worked as head librarian at the Phoenix Public Library's Central Branch, a position she had held for 6 years according to employment records. Colleagues described her as methodical and dedicated to her work. Sarah was always the first one in and often the last to leave, said Carmen Rodriguez, who worked alongside Mitchell in the reference department. She took her job seriously, especially when it came to helping people research their family histories or local stories. Beyond her library duties, Mitchell contributed freelance articles to the Arizona Republic newspaper. Her editor, James Patterson, confirmed that she had been working on a series about abandoned religious sites across Maricopa County. She had this idea that these old churches and missions held untold stories about Arizona's early settlers, Patterson stated in a 1983 police interview. She was particularly interested in places that had been forgotten or left behind when communities moved elsewhere. According to her sister Linda Hayes, Mitchell had developed this interest in historical research following her divorce from Mark Mitchell in February 1983. The divorce proceedings, filed in Maricopa County Superior Court, cited irreconcilable differences. Mark Mitchell, an insurance adjuster, had moved out of their shared Phoenix home 6 months before the legal proceedings concluded. The divorce was difficult for Sarah, Linda Hayes told investigators. She threw herself into her work and started spending more time on these research projects. Mitchell lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom house on East McDowell Road in Phoenix. Neighbors described her as quiet but friendly. Mrs. Eleanor Peterson, who lived next door, said Mitchell maintained a regular schedule. She left for work every morning at 7:30 sharp, Peterson recalled. On weekends, she would work in her small garden or sit on the front porch reading. She always waved when she saw me. The house, purchased jointly with her ex-husband in 1978, became Mitchell's sole property following the divorce settlement. Financial records showed she made regular mortgage payments and maintained steady employment income. Detective Ray Hawkins, who initially handled the missing person case, noted that Mitchell's personal affairs appeared to be in order at the time of her disappearance. Mitchell's research interests had led her to make several trips to rural Arizona communities during the spring and summer of 1983. She kept detailed notes in a spiral-bound notebook, according to her sister. Sarah was very organized about her research, Linda Hayes explained. She would write down the names of people she interviewed, dates she visited places, and observations about what she found. She said it helped her keep everything straight for her articles. Church records from St. Mary's Mission show that Mitchell had contacted Father Miguel Santos in late September 1983, requesting permission to photograph historical documents and interview longtime parishioners. Father Santos, who had served the Wickenburg community for 12 years, remembered their phone conversation. She was very polite and seemed knowledgeable about church history, he said. She mentioned she was working on an article about how these rural missions served pioneer families. On the day of her disappearance, Mitchell had breakfast with her mother, Dorothy Mitchell, at the older woman's Phoenix apartment. According to Dorothy Mitchell's statement, her daughter appeared in good spirits and discussed her plans for the day. She said she was excited about this church project, Dorothy Mitchell told police. Sarah mentioned she had found some interesting information about the mission's early years and wanted to verify some facts with people who had grown up in that area. Linda Hayes received a phone call from her sister around 10:30 a.m. that morning. Sarah called to let me know she was heading out to Wickenburg, Hayes reported. She said she expected to be back in Phoenix by dinner time and asked if I wanted to meet for Sunday brunch the next day. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Mitchell's 1979 Honda Civic was found abandoned on Highway 60, approximately 20 miles east of Wickenburg, at 6:45 p.m. that same day. Arizona Department of Public Safety Officer David Chen discovered the vehicle during a routine patrol. The car was parked on the shoulder with the keys still in the ignition and the driver's door unlocked. Mitchell's purse was found on the passenger seat, containing her wallet with credit cards and $42 in cash. The gas station where Mitchell was last seen sits at the intersection of Highway 60 and Wickenburg Way. Owner Bill Thompson confirmed that Hayes, his employee, accurately identified Mitchell from photographs shown by investigators. "Bob has worked here for 3 years and has a good memory for faces," Thompson said. He remembered her because she asked specific questions about getting to the old mission and seemed like she knew what she was looking for. Mitchell's camera, a Canon AE-1 she had purchased specifically for her research project, was missing from the abandoned vehicle. Her sister confirmed that Mitchell never traveled to research sites without the camera. She was always taking pictures of documents, building details, anything that might be useful for her articles, Linda Hayes said. That camera was like her notebook. She took it everywhere when she was working on a story. St. Mary's Mission Church, built in 1889 according to Historical Society records, sits 3 miles north of downtown Wickenburg on a dirt road. The adobe structure had fallen into disrepair by 1983, with services held only twice monthly. Father Santos traveled from Phoenix to conduct masses and had been working with community volunteers to preserve the building's historical significance. Several Wickenburg residents reported seeing an unfamiliar woman matching Mitchell's description in town that afternoon. Mary Rodriguez, who worked at the local grocery store, told investigators she noticed a woman with shoulder-length brown hair asking for directions. "She seemed like she was from the city," Rodriguez stated. "She was dressed nicely and carried herself like someone who worked in an office." The initial police investigation focused on the area surrounding the abandoned vehicle. Search teams from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office combed the desert terrain for 3 days, but found no additional evidence. The harsh October heat and vast landscape presented significant challenges for the search effort. Mitchell's ex-husband Mark provided investigators with a detailed account of his whereabouts on October 15th. He had been working at his insurance office in Scottsdale and provided time-stamped client records to support his statement. Mark was cooperative with the investigation, Detective Hawkins noted in his report. He expressed concern about Sarah's welfare despite their divorced status. Friends and colleagues described Mitchell as reliable and cautious. Carmen Rodriguez emphasized that her friend was not the type of person to take unnecessary risks. Sarah was very practical, Rodriguez said. If she was going somewhere unfamiliar, she would tell people where she was going and when she expected to return. She wasn't spontaneous or reckless. The case attracted attention from local media outlets. The Arizona Republic published a front-page story 3 days after Mitchell's disappearance, including her photograph and details about her research project. Phoenix television stations KPHO and KTVK aired evening news segments appealing for information from the public. Mitchell's research materials, found in her Phoenix home, revealed the extent of her historical investigation. She had collected information about 17 different religious sites across Arizona, with detailed notes about their founding dates, original congregations, and current status. St. Mary's Mission was listed as one of her primary subjects of interest. The Wickenburg community, with a population of approximately 4,800 residents in 1983, rallied to support the search effort. Local volunteers organized systematic searches of the surrounding desert area. Hardware store owner Tom Wilson coordinated civilian search teams. Everyone knew someone was missing, and people wanted to help, Wilson recalled. We had ranchers, retirees, shop owners, all kinds of folks giving up their weekends to look for her. Mitchell's disappearance occurred during a period when several women had gone missing across Arizona and neighboring states. Law enforcement agencies had begun tracking patterns and sharing information about unsolved cases. Detective Hawkins acknowledged that investigators considered whether Mitchell's disappearance might be connected to other incidents, but no definitive links were established. The investigation revealed that Mitchell had been methodical in her research approach. She typically visited locations during daylight hours, interviewed multiple sources about the same topics, and maintained copies of her notes at home. Her systematic methods made her sudden disappearance particularly puzzling to investigators and family members. As October 1983 drew to a close, the case remained active, but with few solid leads. The abandoned vehicle yielded minimal forensic evidence, and witness sightings were limited to the hours immediately before Mitchell's disappearance. The vast desert landscape and remote location of her research site complicated efforts to determine what had happened. during those crucial hours when she vanished without a trace. The search for Sarah Mitchell intensified on October 16, 1983, when her sister Linda Hayes contacted the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office after Mitchell failed to return home or answer phone calls. Hayes had expected to hear from her sister by Sunday morning, as they had planned to meet for brunch at a Phoenix restaurant. Sarah was always punctual and reliable, Hayes told Deputy Sheriff Michael Torres during the initial missing person report. When she didn't answer her phone Saturday night or Sunday morning, I knew something was wrong. Detective Ray Hawkins assumed primary responsibility for the investigation on October 17th. With 15 years of experience in missing person cases, Hawkins immediately recognized the unusual circumstances surrounding Mitchell's disappearance. Most adults who disappear voluntarily take personal items, money, or leave some indication of their intentions, Hawkins explained in his initial case notes. Mitchell left her purse, her keys were in the car, and she had told multiple people where she was going and when she expected to return. The abandoned Honda Civic underwent thorough forensic examination at the Arizona Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory in Phoenix. Technicians found Mitchell's fingerprints on the steering wheel, door handles, and rearview mirror, consistent with normal vehicle operation. No unidentified fingerprints were discovered inside the car. The vehicle showed no signs of mechanical problems that might have caused Mitchell to abandon it voluntarily. Hawkins conducted extensive interviews with Mitchell's immediate family during the first week of the investigation. Dorothy Mitchell, Sarah's 68-year-old mother, provided investigators with detailed information about her daughter's habits and personality. Sarah was very independent, but she was also considerate, Dorothy Mitchell stated. She would never disappear without telling someone. She knew I worried about her driving alone to those remote places. Mark Mitchell, despite being divorced from Sarah for 8 months, cooperated fully with investigators. He provided a detailed timeline of his activities on October 15th, supported by documentation from his insurance office in Scottsdale. Mark seemed genuinely concerned about Sarah's welfare, Detective Hawkins noted. He mentioned they had remained on civil terms following their divorce, and that he respected her work as a journalist. The investigation expanded to include interviews with Mitchell's colleagues at the Phoenix Public Library. Head librarian supervisor Margaret Walsh confirmed that Mitchell had requested Friday afternoon off to conduct research in Wickenburg. Sarah was dedicated to her freelance writing, Walsh told investigators. She often used personal time to visit historical sites for her articles. The library administration supported her research interests because they sometimes led to acquisitions for our local history collection. Carmen Rodriguez, Mitchell's closest friend and co-worker, provided crucial insight into Mitchell's state of mind during the weeks before her disappearance. According to Rodriguez's statement, Mitchell had mentioned feeling optimistic about her research project and excited about potential discoveries at St. Mary's Mission. Sarah said she had found some interesting discrepancies in official records about the church's founding, Rodriguez told Detective Hawkins. She thought there might be a good story there about early Arizona settlers. Father Miguel Santos at St. Mary's Mission Church confirmed that Mitchell had scheduled an appointment for October 15th. He had expected her to arrive around 2 p.m. to photograph historical documents and interview elderly parishioners about the church's history. When she didn't arrive by 4 p.m., I assumed she had encountered travel difficulties or changed her plans, Father Santos explained. It wasn't unusual for researchers to reschedule, especially those coming from Phoenix. The church records Mitchell intended to examine remained untouched in Father Santos's office. These documents included baptismal records dating to 1889, correspondence between early priests and the territorial government of Arizona, and photographs of the original church construction. She had specifically requested to see materials related to the church's founding families, Father Santos reported. I had gathered everything she asked about and was prepared to answer her questions. Gas station attendant Robert Hayes provided the most detailed account of Mitchell's final known interaction. Working at Thompson's Shell Station on Highway 60, Hayes recalled serving Mitchell around 2:15 p.m. on October 15th. She bought a Coca-Cola and asked about the best route to the old Mission Church, Hayes told investigators. She seemed perfectly normal, maybe a little excited about her research trip. She thanked me for the directions and said she hoped to finish her work before dark. Station owner Bill Thompson confirmed that his security camera system was not operational on October 15th due to equipment maintenance. "We had been having problems with the recording system for about a week," Thompson explained. "The camera was there, but it wasn't actually recording anything. I wish we had that footage to help with the investigation." The Arizona Department of Public Safety organized systematic ground searches beginning October 18th. Teams of officers and civilian volunteers covered approximately 50 square miles of desert terrain surrounding the location where Mitchell's vehicle was found. Search Coordinator Lieutenant James Morrison deployed teams in grid patterns, focusing initially on areas within walking distance of Highway 60. Volunteer searchers included members of the Wickenburg Chamber of Commerce, local ranchers familiar with the terrain, and hiking clubs from Phoenix and Scottsdale. Mary Wilson, whose husband Tom organized the civilian search effort, participated in daily searches throughout the first week. "We walked miles and miles of desert," Wilson recalled. "Everyone was hoping to find some clue about what happened to her. The desert can be dangerous, but it usually leaves traces when something goes wrong." The search effort faced significant challenges due to the vast and varied terrain. The area surrounding Highway 60 included rocky hills, deep washes, dense mesquite groves, and open desert flats. October temperatures still reached 95 degrees during afternoon hours, making extended searches physically demanding for volunteers and professional rescue teams. Wickenburg Police Chief Robert Anderson coordinated local law enforcement support for the investigation. With a department of only 6 officers serving the small community, Anderson requested assistance from Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies and Arizona Department of Public Safety personnel. "This was the most significant missing person case our town had seen," Anderson stated. "We wanted to make sure we were doing everything possible to find her." Mitchell's research notebook, found in her Phoenix home, provided investigators with important background information about her project. The notebook contained names and phone numbers of people she planned to interview, maps marking locations of interest, and detailed notes about historical discrepancies she had discovered. Detective Hawkins used this information to contact individuals Mitchell had intended to meet in Wickenburg. Among the people Mitchell planned to interview was Rosa Hernandez, an 82-year-old lifelong Wickenburg resident whose family had attended St. Mary's Mission since its founding. Hernandez told investigators she had been expecting Mitchell's visit and had prepared family photographs and documents to share. "I had stories about my grandmother who helped build that church," Hernandez explained. "I was looking forward to talking with the lady from Phoenix about the old days." The investigation revealed that Mitchell had conducted preliminary research at the Arizona Historical Society in Phoenix before traveling to Wickenburg. Society librarian, Dr. Patricia Morgan confirmed that Mitchell had spent several hours reviewing territorial records and newspaper archives during early October. She was particularly interested in land grants and mining claims from the 1880s, Dr. Morgan reported. She seemed to be tracking connections between early church supporters and territorial business interests. Local media coverage of Mitchell's disappearance intensified during the second week of October. The Arizona Republic assigned reporter Jennifer Walsh to cover the story full-time. Phoenix television stations, KPHO, KTVK, and KTSP, aired nightly updates about the search effort. "The story resonated with viewers because Sarah seemed like someone they knew," explained KPHO news director Robert Stevens. "She was an ordinary person doing interesting work who had simply vanished." The investigation expanded to examine Mitchell's financial records and recent purchases. Bank statements showed normal spending patterns with no unusual transactions. Her last credit card purchase occurred at 11:30 a.m. on October 15th at a Phoenix gas station where she filled her Honda Civic before traveling to Wickenburg. Everything indicated this was a planned research trip, not a spontaneous departure, Detective Hawkins noted in his case file. Mitchell's ex-husband Mark provided additional insight into her personality and habits during a follow-up interview on October 20th. "Sarah was cautious by nature," Mark Mitchell told investigators. "She always told people where she was going when she traveled alone. She carried a road atlas and made sure her car was in good condition before taking long trips. She wasn't the type to take unnecessary chances." The Phoenix Public Library organized a prayer vigil for Mitchell on October 22nd. Approximately 200 people attended the evening event, including co-workers, library patrons, and community members who had followed news coverage of her disappearance. Library Director William Harper spoke about Mitchell's dedication to her work and her contributions to local historical research. Sarah helped countless people discover their family histories and learn about Arizona's past, Harper said. She brought passion and professionalism to everything she did. Investigators interviewed dozens of Wickenburg residents during the first 2 weeks of October, seeking anyone who might have seen Mitchell after her gas station stop. Several people reported seeing an unfamiliar woman in town that afternoon, but descriptions varied, and no one could provide definitive identification. Hardware store clerk Janet Morrison thought she remembered a woman asking about local churches, but acknowledged uncertainty about the date and time. The search effort extended beyond immediate ground searches to include aerial reconnaissance. Arizona Department of Public Safety helicopters conducted systematic flights over the search area, looking for any signs of Mitchell or additional evidence. Pilot Captain Dennis Rodriguez reported that the aerial searches covered approximately 200 square miles, but revealed no significant findings. "We flew grid patterns at various altitudes," Rodriguez explained. "The desert landscape makes it possible to spot unusual objects or disturbances, but we didn't see anything that appeared related to the missing person case." Mitchell's camera equipment became a focus of the investigation when family members confirmed it was missing from her abandoned vehicle. The Canon AE-1 camera, purchased specifically for her research project, represented significant value and would have been essential for documenting historical materials. Sarah never went on research trips without that camera, her sister Linda Hayes emphasized. She was very protective of it and always kept it in a padded case. Local pawn shops and camera dealers received descriptions of Mitchell's missing equipment, but no matching items were reported sold or traded during the weeks following her disappearance. Detective Hawkins expanded the search to include Phoenix area businesses, reasoning that anyone who took Mitchell's camera might attempt to sell it in the larger metropolitan area. The investigation revealed that Mitchell had been methodical in documenting her research activities. Friends and family found detailed files in her home office containing correspondence with historical societies, photocopies of newspaper articles, and maps marking locations she had visited or planned to visit. Her organizational system suggested someone who was serious about her work and unlikely to abandon a project without explanation. As October ended, the active search phase of the investigation began winding down due to resource constraints and lack of new leads. Volunteer searches continued on weekends, organized by community groups and Mitchell's family, but professional law enforcement resources were gradually redirected to other cases. Detective Hawkins maintained the case as active and continued following up on tips and reported sightings. The Mitchell family established a reward fund offering $5,000 for information leading to Sarah's location or explaining her disappearance. Local businesses in both Phoenix and Wickenburg contributed to the fund, and flyers with Mitchell's photograph were distributed throughout central Arizona. "We refuse to give up hope," Linda Hayes announced at a press conference on October 31st. "Someone knows what happened to Sarah, and we believe the reward might encourage them to come forward." The case attracted attention from missing person advocacy groups and other families dealing with similar situations. The National Organization for Missing Adults contacted the Mitchell family offering support and resources. Representative Susan Peterson explained that adult disappearance cases often require sustained public attention to generate new leads. "Law enforcement does excellent work, but community involvement is crucial for keeping these cases active," Peterson said. By November 1983, the immediate crisis phase of Mitchell's disappearance had settled into a long-term investigation. Detective Hawkins continued reviewing case files and following up on occasional tips, but acknowledged that progress would likely require new evidence or witness information. The abandoned Honda Civic was released to Mitchell's family after forensic examination concluded. Her sister, Linda Hayes, arranged for the vehicle to be stored rather than sold, hoping it might eventually provide additional clues. The impact on Mitchell's family became increasingly apparent as weeks passed without resolution. Her mother, Dorothy, required medical attention for stress-related health problems. Linda Hayes took extended leave from her job to coordinate search efforts and manage media inquiries. Mark Mitchell, despite their divorced status, participated in search activities and offered financial support for investigation expenses. Father Santos at St. Mary's Mission Church held special prayers for Mitchell during November services. The small congregation included many elderly residents who had lived in Wickenburg for decades and remembered previous disappearances in the area. "We prayed for Sarah's safe return and for strength for her family," Father Santos explained. The community felt connected to her story, even though most people had never met her. The investigation files by December 1983 contained hundreds of pages of interviews, search reports, and follow-up activities. Despite extensive effort by law enforcement and volunteers, key questions remained unanswered. What happened to Sarah Mitchell during the hours between her gas station stop and the discovery of her abandoned vehicle? Why was her camera missing while other valuables remained untouched? Had she reached St. Mary's Mission Church or disappeared somewhere along the route? Detective Ray Hawkins officially retired from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in June 1984, 8 months after Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. The case was reassigned to Detective Patricia Morse, who inherited a file containing over 400 pages of reports, witness statements, and investigative notes. According to department records, Morse had handled 23 missing person cases during her 7-year career, but acknowledged that Mitchell's disappearance presented unique challenges due to the lack of physical evidence and witnesses. The Mitchell family maintained active involvement in the investigation throughout 1984 and 1985. Linda Hayes contacted the sheriff's office monthly for updates and organized annual commemorative searches on the anniversary of her sister's disappearance. "We refuse to let people forget about Sarah," Hayes told the Arizona Republic in October 1984. "Someone out there knows what happened, and we believe persistence will eventually lead to answers." In March 1985, Detective Morse received a report from the Coconino County Sheriff's Office regarding a possible sighting of Mitchell near Flagstaff. Truck driver William Robertson contacted authorities claiming he had given a ride to a woman matching Mitchell's description along Interstate 17. According to Robertson's statement, the woman identified herself as Sarah and said she was traveling to visit family in Colorado. "She seemed nervous and kept looking over her shoulder," Robertson reported. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I saw the missing person flyer at a truck stop, I recognized her face." The Flagstaff lead prompted Detective Morse to expand the investigation beyond Arizona. She contacted law enforcement agencies in Colorado, New Mexico, and Nevada, requesting they review their records for any Jane Doe cases or unidentified individuals who might be Mitchell. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation reported 2 cases involving women of similar age and description, but dental records ruled out any connection to Mitchell. Dorothy Mitchell, Sarah's mother, experienced declining health during 1985. According to medical records from Phoenix General Hospital, she was treated for hypertension and anxiety related to her daughter's disappearance. Family physician Dr. Robert Chen noted that Dorothy Mitchell's condition worsened around significant dates such as Sarah's birthday and the anniversary of her disappearance. The uncertainty about her daughter's fate was taking a severe toll on her physical and mental health, Dr. Chen observed in his patient notes. The case received renewed media attention in October 1985, when Phoenix television station KTVK aired a special segment about unsolved missing person cases in Arizona. Reporter Michael Torres interviewed Linda Hayes and Detective Morse about the ongoing investigation. 2 years later, "We still have more questions than answers," Detective Morse acknowledged during the broadcast. "But we continue following every lead and remain committed to finding out what happened to Sarah Mitchell." In January 1986, Detective Morse was promoted to sergeant and transferred to the robbery division. The Mitchell case was reassigned to Detective James Morrison, marking the 3rd lead investigator in just over 2 years. Morrison reviewed the entire case file and conducted follow-up interviews with key witnesses and family members. His assessment noted that while the investigation had been thorough, the passage of time had made it increasingly difficult to generate new leads. Linda Hayes became increasingly frustrated with what she perceived as reduced attention to her sister's case. In April 1986, she contacted the Arizona Attorney General's office requesting a review of the investigation. Assistant Attorney General Susan Rodriguez responded that while the case remained active, limited resources required law enforcement agencies to prioritize cases with more promising leads. "We understand the family's concerns, But Detective Morrison and his team are doing everything possible within their capabilities, Rodriguez wrote in her official response. The investigation took an unexpected turn in September 1986, when maintenance workers at St. Mary's Mission Church discovered items buried beneath a pile of construction debris behind the building. Father Santos contacted the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office after workers found a leather portfolio and several manila folders containing what appeared to be research documents. Detective Morrison responded to examine the materials and determined they contained historical records and newspaper clippings similar to those Mitchell had been researching. Forensic examination of the discovered materials revealed no fingerprints or other physical evidence linking them directly to Mitchell. However, several documents matched topics mentioned in Mitchell's research notes found at her Phoenix home. The papers included information about early Arizona territorial government, mining claims from the 1880s, and correspondence between church officials and territorial administrators. The materials were consistent with Mitchell's research interests, but we couldn't establish a definitive connection, Detective Morrison noted in his report. Father Santos provided investigators with additional context about the construction debris where the documents were found. According to church records, volunteer crews had been working intermittently on building maintenance and grounds cleanup since early 1983. We had materials stored outside because our storage space was limited, Father Santos explained. It's possible these papers were left by a researcher who visited the church, but I have no specific memory of anyone leaving documents behind. The discovery prompted renewed searching of the church grounds and surrounding area. Detective Morrison organized a systematic excavation of areas where debris had been stored or moved during the past 3 years. The effort involved crime scene technicians and volunteer searchers, but produced no additional evidence related to Mitchell's disappearance. In December 1986, Linda Hayes hired private investigator David Palmer to supplement the official investigation. Palmer, a former Phoenix police detective with 15 years of experience, agreed to review the case file and pursue independent leads. Linda felt the case wasn't receiving adequate attention from law enforcement, Palmer explained. She wanted someone dedicated exclusively to finding answers about what happened to Sarah. Palmer's investigation began with re-interviewing witnesses and family members, seeking details that might have been overlooked or forgotten during earlier questioning. He spent considerable time reviewing Mitchell's research materials and attempting to understand her specific interests in Arizona territorial history. Sarah was obviously passionate about this research, Palmer noted in his case summary. She had uncovered some interesting discrepancies in official records that she thought might make a good newspaper story. The private investigation revealed that Mitchell had contacted several elderly Wickenburg residents during the weeks before her disappearance. Palmer located 3 individuals whom Mitchell had spoken with by telephone but had not yet interviewed in person. Maria Santos, an 89-year-old whose family had helped establish St. Mary's Mission, remembered receiving a call from Mitchell in early October 1983. She asked about the early families who supported the church, Santos recalled. I told her I had stories and photographs she might find interesting. Palmer also interviewed Thomas Anderson, a retired rancher whose property adjoined the original mission land grant. Anderson confirmed that Mitchell had contacted him requesting information about property boundaries and early settlement patterns. She was trying to understand how the church acquired its land and who were the original benefactors, Anderson explained. I told her there were some interesting stories about territorial politics and business dealings from that era. The private investigators' work identified several potential leads that had not been fully explored during the official investigation. Palmer discovered that Mitchell had been researching connections between early church supporters and territorial business interests, particularly mining and land development companies. Her notes suggested she had found discrepancies between official territorial records and newspaper accounts from the 1880s. In March 1987, Palmer submitted a detailed report to Linda Hayes, outlining his findings and recommendations for continued investigation. The report identified specific individuals Mitchell had planned to interview and suggested that her research may have uncovered information that someone preferred to keep hidden. Sarah's disappearance occurred just as she was getting close to something significant, Palmer concluded. The timing seems more than coincidental. Detective Morrison reviewed Palmer's report and agreed to pursue several of the suggested investigative leads. However, He noted that many of the elderly individuals Mitchell had planned to interview were no longer alive or were unable to participate in questioning due to health problems. "Time is working against us in this case," Morrison acknowledged. "We're losing potential witnesses and sources of information with each passing year." The case received national attention in May 1987 when it was featured on the television program Unsolved Mysteries. The broadcast included interviews with Linda Hayes, Detective Morrison, and private investigator Palmer, as well as reenactments of Mitchell's final known activities. The program generated over 200 tips from viewers across the United States, though none provided breakthrough information about Mitchell's fate. One caller to the Unsolved Mysteries hotline reported seeing a woman matching Mitchell's description at a bus station in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in November 1983. The witness, Janet Rodriguez, claimed the woman appeared frightened and asked about bus schedules to Colorado. However, when Detective Morrison traveled to Albuquerque to interview Rodriguez in person, she acknowledged uncertainty about the date and admitted the woman might not have been Mitchell. The investigation revealed patterns of missing women cases across the Southwest during the early 1980s. Detective Morrison collaborated with law enforcement agencies in neighboring states to compare cases and identify potential connections. Between 1981 and 1985, 7 women had disappeared under similar circumstances in Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and Colorado. All were educated professionals traveling alone, and none of their cases had been solved. Linda Hayes organized the first annual Sarah Mitchell Memorial Fund dinner in October 1987, 4 years after her sister's disappearance. The event raised money for missing person investigations and brought together families dealing with similar situations. Guest speaker Dr. Margaret Wilson, a criminologist from Arizona State University, addressed the challenges facing investigators in missing adult cases. Without witnesses or physical evidence, these cases require sustained effort and community support to remain viable, Dr. Wilson explained. The memorial dinner attracted attention from other families of missing persons and led to the formation of a support group that met monthly in Phoenix. Linda Hayes served as coordinator and invited speakers including law enforcement officials, private investigators, and mental health professionals. "We realized we weren't alone in dealing with these situations," Hayes said. "There are many families struggling with uncertainty and feeling forgotten by the system." In January 1988, Detective Morrison was transferred to the Narcotics Division, and the Mitchell case was reassigned to Detective Carol Stevens. Stevens, who had recently joined the sheriff's office after 8 years with the Phoenix Police Department, brought fresh perspective to the investigation. She conducted a comprehensive review of all case materials and identified several areas that warranted additional attention. Detective Stevens focused particularly on Mitchell's research activities and the specific information she had been trying to verify. Stevens contacted the Arizona Historical Society and reviewed all materials Mitchell had examined during her pre-disappearance research. She also interviewed current and former employees who might remember details about Mitchell's visits and the specific documents she had requested. The historical research revealed that Mitchell had been investigating discrepancies in official records regarding land grants and mineral rights from the territorial period. Several mining claims and property transfers from the 1880s contained conflicting information in different government documents. Mitchell's notes suggested she believed these discrepancies might indicate fraud or corruption involving territorial officials and prominent business leaders. Dr. Patricia Morgan, at the Arizona Historical Society, provided Detective Stevens with additional context about Mitchell's research interests. Sarah had identified several cases where official territorial records contradicted contemporary newspaper accounts, Dr. Morgan explained. She thought there might be a pattern of document falsification or record manipulation that had been covered up for decades. The investigation into Mitchell's research led Detective Stevens to examine the backgrounds of prominent families and business interests from Arizona's territorial period. She discovered that several individuals Mitchell had been researching were ancestors of current political and business leaders in Arizona. While this information was interesting historically, Stevens found no evidence connecting these discoveries to Mitchell's disappearance. Private investigator Palmer continued working independently on the case throughout 1988 and 1989. His investigation focused on tracking down elderly individuals who might have information about the historical events Mitchell was researching. Palmer interviewed descendants of territorial-era families and reviewed private family documents that weren't available in official archives. Palmer's research confirmed that Mitchell had uncovered evidence of questionable land deals and mining claim manipulations from the 1880s. However, he found no indication that this historical information posed any current threat to living individuals or their families. Sarah had discovered some interesting historical scandals, but they were ancient history by 1983, Palmer concluded in his updated report. The case took another unexpected turn in August 1989, when construction workers renovating the Wickenburg Town Hall discovered a cache of old documents in a sealed basement room. The papers included territorial government records, mining company correspondence, and legal documents dating from the 1880s through the 1920s. Town officials contacted the Arizona Historical Society to evaluate the historical significance of the discovery. Detective Stevens learned about the document discovery and requested permission to examine the materials for any connection to Mitchell's research. She found several documents that matched topics mentioned in Mitchell's research notes, including correspondence about St. Mary's Mission Church and records of land grants in the Wickenburg area. However, none of the newly discovered documents appeared to contain information that would have warranted Mitchell's disappearance. By 1990, the official investigation had generated over 800 pages of reports, witness statements, and follow-up activities. Despite extensive effort by multiple investigators and private parties, the case remained unsolved. Detective Stevens maintained the file as active, but acknowledged that new evidence would be required to advance the investigation significantly. The Mitchell family's persistence kept the case visible in local media and community awareness. Linda Hayes continued organizing annual memorial events and maintaining contact with law enforcement officials. She also corresponded with families of other missing persons and participated in advocacy efforts for improved missing person investigation procedures. In March 1990, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office received a new lead when Detective Maria Gonzalez joined the department after completing advanced training in cold case investigation techniques. Sheriff Tom Wilson assigned Gonzalez to review several unsolved missing person cases, including Mitchell's disappearance. Gonzalez brought modern investigative methods and fresh perspective to cases that had remained unsolved for years. Detective Gonzalez began her review of the Mitchell case by creating a comprehensive timeline of all known events and activities during the months preceding the disappearance. She also developed detailed profiles of all individuals Mitchell had contacted or planned to meet during her research project. This systematic approach identified several gaps in the original investigation that warranted additional attention. The new investigation strategy involved recontacting witnesses and family members using updated interview techniques. Detective Gonzalez also planned to utilize advancing forensic technologies that weren't available during the original investigation. Cold cases benefit from fresh eyes and new methods, Gonzalez explained to Linda Hayes during their first meeting. We're going to take this investigation back to the beginning and build it systematically using everything we've learned over the past 7 years. Detective Maria Gonzalez received an unexpected call on March 15, 1993, exactly 10 years and 5 months after Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. Father Miguel Santos contacted the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office to report a significant discovery during renovation work at St. Mary's Mission Church in Wickenburg. Construction supervisor Robert Chen had found a leather-bound journal hidden behind loose adobe bricks in a wall cavity near the church altar. The book contained handwritten entries dated from September through October 1983. Gonzalez immediately traveled to Wickenburg to examine the discovered journal and interview Father Santos about the circumstances of its discovery. According to Santos, the renovation project had been planned for over a year to address structural problems in the 110-year-old building. We were reinforcing the altar wall when workers noticed some bricks were loose, Santos explained. Behind them was a small cavity that appeared to have been deliberately created. The journal was wrapped in plastic and placed inside. Construction supervisor Chen provided a detailed account of the discovery process. His crew had been working systematically to identify and repair areas of structural weakness in the adobe walls. "We found several places where the original construction had deteriorated," Chen reported. This particular spot was different because the bricks had been removed and replaced more recently. The mortar was different from the original construction. The journal measured approximately 6 inches by 8 inches and contained 150 pages of handwritten entries. Detective Gonzalez immediately secured the item as evidence and arranged for forensic examination to determine its authenticity and potential connection to Mitchell's disappearance. The Maricopa County Crime Laboratory conducted handwriting analysis, fingerprint examination, and paper dating tests on the discovered material. Forensic handwriting expert Dr. Patricia Williams compared the journal entries with known samples of Mitchell's handwriting from library employment records, personal correspondence, and research notes. After extensive analysis, Dr. Williams concluded with 95% certainty that the handwriting matched Mitchell's known writing characteristics. The letter formations, spacing patterns, and individual character traits are consistent with the exemplar samples, Dr. Williams reported in her official analysis. Linda Hayes was contacted to examine the journal and provide verification of her sister's handwriting. Hayes immediately recognized the writing style and several personal references within the entries. "This is definitely Sarah's handwriting," Hayes confirmed during her interview with Detective Gonzalez. "She mentions things that only family members would know, and the way she phrases things is exactly how she talked." The journal entries began on September 12, 1983, and documented Mitchell's research activities during the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Early entries described her growing interest in discrepancies between official territorial records and contemporary newspaper accounts from the 1880s. Mitchell had identified several cases where land grants, mining claims, and business transactions appeared to have been falsified or manipulated in government documents. According to the journal, Mitchell believed she had discovered evidence of systematic fraud involving territorial officials and prominent business families during Arizona's pre-statehood period. Her entries detailed specific discrepancies in property records, mineral rights documents, and correspondence between territorial administrators and private interests. "The more I research these families, the more I realize how much money was involved in these land deals," Mitchell wrote on September 18, 1983. The investigation revealed that Mitchell's research had focused on connections between early church benefactors and questionable business practices. St. Mary's Mission Church had received significant financial support from several families whose business dealings appeared suspect based on Mitchell's document analysis. These people presented themselves as pillars of the community, but their wealth came from cheating other settlers and manipulating government records, Mitchell wrote on September 25, 1983. Detective Gonzalez contacted retired Detective Ray Hawkins to discuss the journal discovery and its implications for understanding Mitchell's disappearance. Hawkins, now living in Tucson, reviewed copies of the relevant journal entries and acknowledged that the original investigation had not fully explored Mitchell's specific research interests. "We knew she was researching church history, but we didn't realize she had uncovered potential evidence of historical fraud," Hawkins admitted. The journal entries from early October 1983 revealed Mitchell's growing excitement about her research discoveries and her plans to publish articles about territorial-era corruption. She had contacted editors at both the Arizona Republic and Phoenix New-Times about potential story ideas. "This could be the biggest story I've ever worked on," Mitchell wrote on October 3, 1983. "The families involved are still prominent in Arizona politics and business. People need to know the truth about how some of these fortunes were built." More concerning were journal entries from the final 2 weeks before Mitchell's disappearance. Beginning October 5, 1983, she began expressing concerns about being followed and receiving unusual phone calls at her home. "Someone called last night and hung up when I answered," Mitchell wrote. "This morning I noticed the same car parked across from my house for the second day in a row. I'm probably being paranoid, but something feels wrong." The journal entry dated October 10, 1983, described a confrontation Mitchell had experienced while researching at the Arizona Historical Society. According to her account, an unidentified man approached her in the research room and warned her to stop digging into things that don't concern you. When Mitchell reported the incident to library security, the man had already left the building. Detective Gonzalez contacted Dr. Patricia Morgan at the Arizona Historical Society to inquire about the incident Mitchell described in her journal. Dr. Morgan recalled that Mitchell had mentioned feeling uncomfortable during her final visit to the facility, but had not provided specific details about any confrontation. She seemed nervous and kept looking around the research room, Dr. Morgan remembered. She left earlier than usual and said she had enough information for her project. The most significant journal entry was dated October 14, 1983, the day before Mitchell's disappearance. In this final entry, she wrote extensively about her fears and her decision to hide copies of her research documents. "I've made copies of everything and hidden them where only I can find them," Mitchell wrote. "If something happens to me, I want there to be evidence of what I discovered. These families have been covering up their crimes for over a century." The October 14th entry concluded with Mitchell's plans for the following day's trip to Wickenburg. She wrote that she intended to conduct final interviews with elderly residents and photograph documents at St. Mary's Mission Church before completing her article. "Tomorrow I finish this research once and for all," she wrote. "Then I'm going to expose the truth about these people, regardless of how powerful they think they are." Detective Gonzalez organized a systematic search of St. Mary's Mission Church and the surrounding grounds, looking for additional evidence that Mitchell might have hidden during her final day. The search involved crime scene technicians, metal detectors, and ground-penetrating radar equipment. After 3 days of intensive searching, investigators found no additional materials connected to Mitchell's research or disappearance. The journal discovery prompted Detective Gonzalez to re-examine the list of families and individuals Mitchell had been researching. She identified 12 prominent Arizona families, whose ancestors appeared in Mitchell's notes as subjects of investigation. Several of these families continued to hold significant political and business influence in 1993, though none had been considered suspects during the original investigation. Linda Hayes provided Detective Gonzalez with additional family background that had not been documented during earlier investigations. According to Hayes, Sarah had mentioned receiving unusual phone calls and feeling watched during the weeks before her disappearance, but had not wanted to worry family members with specific details. Sarah said she thought someone was trying to scare her away from her research, Hayes recalled. She was determined not to let intimidation stop her from doing her job. The investigation expanded to examine the backgrounds and current status of individuals connected to the families Mitchell had been researching. Detective Gonzalez discovered that 3 of the 12 families had members serving in elected offices or holding significant business positions in 1983. While this information was noteworthy, no evidence directly connected any living individuals to Mitchell's disappearance. Private investigator David Palmer, who had continued working on the case independently, reviewed the journal contents and provided his assessment to Linda Hayes. Palmer's analysis focused on the specific threats and intimidation Mitchell described in her final entries. Sarah was clearly afraid of someone, and that fear was based on her research discoveries, Palmer concluded. The timing of her disappearance, just as she was preparing to publish her findings, suggests more than coincidence. The journal revelation attracted renewed media attention to Mitchell's case. The Arizona Republic assigned investigative reporter Susan Martinez to examine the historical allegations Mitchell had been researching. Martinez's preliminary research confirmed that several territorial-era business transactions appeared questionable, though determining definitive proof of fraud after more than a century presented significant challenges. Detective Gonzalez contacted the FBI's Phoenix field office to discuss potential federal involvement in the case, given the implications of Mitchell's research regarding historical government document fraud. Special Agent Robert Thompson reviewed the case materials but determined that the statute of limitations had expired on any federal crimes that might have occurred during the territorial period. While the historical allegations are interesting, they don't establish federal jurisdiction over Mitchell's disappearance, Thompson explained. The investigation revealed that Mitchell had been more thorough and systematic in her research than previously understood. Her journal entries described weeks of careful document analysis, cross-referencing multiple sources, and attempts to verify information through interviews with elderly residents. Sarah wasn't just writing a human interest story about old churches, Detective Gonzalez noted. She was conducting serious investigative journalism that may have threatened powerful interests. In May 1993, Detective Gonzalez interviewed Thomas Anderson, the retired rancher Mitchell had contacted before her disappearance. Anderson, now 89 years old, provided additional details about their telephone conversation that he had not shared during earlier interviews. According to Anderson, Mitchell had specifically asked about business relationships between early church supporters and territorial government officials. She wanted to know if there were stories about corruption or questionable deals, Anderson recalled. I told her there were always rumors about some of those families, but proving anything would be difficult after so many years. The investigation also revealed that Mitchell had attempted to contact descendants of several families she was researching. Phone records from October 1983 showed calls to individuals whose surnames matched those in Mitchell's research notes. However, attempts to interview these individuals in 1993 were largely unsuccessful due to their advanced age or reluctance to discuss family history. Dr. E. Margaret Wilson, the Arizona State University criminologist who had spoken at Mitchell family events, reviewed the journal discovery and provided her professional assessment. The journal content suggests Sarah Mitchell may have been targeted specifically because of her research activities, Dr. Wilson concluded. The pattern of intimidation described in her entries, followed by her disappearance just before publication, indicates a deliberate attempt to suppress her findings. The journal discovery also prompted re-examination of physical evidence from Mitchell's abandoned vehicle. Advanced forensic techniques available in 1993 were applied to materials that had been stored since the original investigation. However, DNA analysis and enhanced fingerprint examination produced no new evidence connecting specific individuals to Mitchell's disappearance. Linda Hayes organized a press conference in June 1993 to announce the journal discovery and appeal for additional information about her sister's case. The event attracted representatives from major Arizona media outlets and generated renewed public interest in the decade-old mystery. Sarah's own words prove she was afraid of someone connected to her research, Hayes stated. We believe people in the community know more than they've shared with investigators. The press conference prompted several new tips from individuals who claimed knowledge about Mitchell's research or disappearance. Detective Gonzalez followed up on each report, but most provided general information rather than specific evidence. One caller claimed to remember seeing Mitchell at St. Mary's Mission Church on October 15, 1983, but could not provide details that hadn't been previously reported. Father Santos, who had served St. Mary's Mission Church since 1971, provided Detective Gonzalez with his recollections of community dynamics during the early 1980s. According to Santos, several prominent families had maintained strong influence over local affairs and were sensitive about their historical reputations. There were certain topics people didn't discuss openly, Santos observed. Family histories and old business dealings were considered private matters that outsiders shouldn't investigate. The investigation expanded to examine similar missing person cases involving journalists or researchers who had been investigating sensitive topics. Detective Gonzalez identified 3 cases from the 1980s in neighboring states where individuals conducting historical research had disappeared under suspicious circumstances. However, no definitive connections were established between these cases and Mitchell's disappearance. In August 1993, the journal contents were submitted for psychological analysis to determine Mitchell's mental state during her final weeks. Dr. Robert Chen, a forensic psychologist, concluded that Mitchell's entries reflected rational thinking and legitimate concerns rather than paranoid delusions. Her descriptions of intimidation and threats appear credible based on the specific details and logical progression of events, Dr. Chen reported. The investigation revealed that Mitchell had been methodical in protecting her research materials. In addition to hiding the journal at St. Mary's Mission Church, she had apparently made copies of key documents and stored them in multiple locations. Despite extensive searching of her Phoenix home and other locations she frequented, investigators never located these additional materials. Detective Gonzalez's investigation confirmed that Mitchell's research had identified genuine discrepancies in historical records. Modern analysis of territorial documents supported many of Mitchell's conclusions about questionable land deals and business transactions from the 1880s. However, Establishing connections between these historical findings and contemporary threats against Mitchell remained challenging. By October 1993, exactly 10 years after Mitchell's disappearance, the investigation had generated new understanding of her final weeks but had not produced definitive answers about her fate. The journal discovery confirmed that Mitchell had good reason to fear for her safety and had taken steps to preserve her research findings. However, identifying specific individuals responsible for any threats against her remained elusive. The case attracted attention from journalism organizations and press freedom advocates who viewed Mitchell's disappearance as potentially related to her investigative work. The Society of Professional Journalists issued a statement calling for continued investigation into cases where reporters had vanished while pursuing sensitive stories. Sarah Mitchell's case represents a threat to investigative journalism and the public's right to know, the organization declared. Linda Hayes continued advocating for additional investigation resources and maintained regular contact with Detective Gonzalez throughout 1993. The family established the Sarah Mitchell Investigative Journalism Fund to support training and safety resources for reporters working on sensitive topics. Sarah believed in the importance of uncovering truth, regardless of who might be uncomfortable with that truth, Hayes stated at the fund's inaugural event. The journal discovery ultimately raised more questions than it answered about Mitchell's disappearance. While it confirmed that she had uncovered significant historical information and felt threatened because of her research, it provided limited evidence about who might have been responsible for those threats, or what ultimately happened to her. The case remained officially open, with Detective Gonzalez committed to pursuing any new leads or evidence that might emerge. The impact of Mitchell's disappearance extended beyond her immediate family to influence discussions about journalist safety and the challenges facing investigators of sensitive topics. Her case became a cautionary tale about the risks faced by reporters who pursue stories involving powerful interests, even when those stories concern historical events. The discovery of her journal ensured that her final words and concerns would be preserved as part of the permanent record, even though the mystery of her fate remained unsolved after a full decade of investigation.